To be concise about my practice is quite difficult because it's really, really broad. Even when I'm making sculpture or making film or working with performers, I think I do it with a painter's sensibility. If I'm boiling it down to an essence, it's about the way a single line can bisect a space. And I think everything else probably bounces off of that. I think it's quite spontaneous. I think it has to be. Everything starts with drawing. If I'm going on a trip somewhere, I'll spend most of my time drawing. So those drawings are of a place. And then when they come back to the studio, for a long time I didn't look at them. They just existed as books on shelves. So it was, in a sense, a kind of physical archive. There were marks and there were colours. I've used those drawings, but I haven't used them as a visual reference. They're kind of a memory archive of being somewhere and moving my body in a certain way in order to make marks. And then that vocabulary finds its way into the studio. What one begets another. It's, I'll be working on a drawing and I'll think, well, that would be really cool if it was like this big, and then there might be a section of that painting or larger drawing, which I think that feels more like a piece of sculpture. So I'll take that shape and maybe cut it out of some cardboard. And so it kind of one bounces off the other. So that you end up with this kind of toolkit of shapes and marks. I guess the important thing is I don't think of my job as being one where I'm trying to settle on a particular style or a particular way of working. I lived in America many years ago, and I worked with an artist whose work was about making wooden furniture. If you're making a table, you're concerned about the height and where the corners, and if you're going to bash yourself on the corner. And I think that was probably my first experience of thinking about how making something is not just a visual concern. It's about a set of physical relationships. It was during that kind of COVID period when I was in the studio, like a lot of people, that I was surrounded by cardboard from having an awful lot of deliveries, pizza boxes, Amazon box, the whole lot. And for some reason, I thought, I want to make some furniture, or I want to make it out of cardboard. So my first efforts were to make some chairs and a bench. I thought, well, that's good, but I kind of know where that's going. It was so domestic that trajectory was just towards more domesticity. It was like I knew where that was going to end up. So I started kind of cutting out forms in sheets of cardboard and then folding. And long story short, I ended up with these kind of tower things. I think they're informed by architecture. Sometimes they're very kind of angular. I wanted to make a form that was a bit more universal, that wasn't one thing in particular. I remember the first columns I did. If you imagine a column as having four sides, it's like a rectangle. And I cut these shapes on the flat sides, and that's kind of boring because they look the same from every side. Whereas if you cut them on the angle, as you move around it, it changes. Yes, they're columns, so there's a line in space, but also they function in space. So as you move around them, they change shape. I take it back to that moment where I was thinking about how my body relates to, am I going to bash myself? So it's about facilitation and restriction and possibility. Because they were made of cardboard, they were movable, so they were modular. They could be played with, and you can turn it upside down, you can put it on the floor. And it's a relationship between an audience as well. I did do one show where I deliberately set it up so that somebody could come in and move it. So there's no risk, nothing bad's going to happen. The sculpture originally was all in cardboard. And then there comes a moment when you think, well, this is good, but what happens if it was made out of steel? And then the most recent ones are sand cast out of aluminium. So that means cutting up the cardboard and giving it to a foundry. And for a while I was painting the aluminium. I think some people thought it was just cardboard painted silver, but it's actually aluminium. I lived and spent a lot of time in Florida, subtropical. So when you live there, you're experiencing and learning about light and temperature and colour. At certain times of day, the sun is so high and so bright that it bleaches everything so that the pink might go dead flat. And then at other times of day, it gets fat. It's like almost the colour just gets round because the sun is lower and warmer. It's a very different experience of light and the effect of light on colour than we have in the north. So I think the colour comes from living in an environment which is about the physical experience. As I am working, I have a very strong sense of instinct about what colour needs to come next. And I think it comes back to that desire to be really specific. It's like when I said, perhaps you can distill the practice down to a line with a space either side. It becomes very, very obvious to me. I think I ended up with an abstracted language because of the freedom it gives me, a bit like the freedom I hope that somebody feels when they come into a space. And I think if you talk to most painters, they'll tell you that studios can become quite anxious spaces, that painting can be quite anxiety-provoking, that kind of push and pull and trying to resolve something. And I got so fed up with that. And I wanted to take that anxiety out of it. Somebody said, I see this element keeps recurring. And I said, yeah, that's funny you should say that. It's like, because when I was working on these things, I would think, I can't use that purple triangle again. And then I thought, wait a minute, it's my painting. I can do whatever the hell I want. If I want to do 100 silver boots, that's okay. That's what feeds the anxiety of being a painter in the studio, that sense that you have to reinvent the wheel every time you step in the studio, and you don't. Studio practice or art in general is often about just the things you love. It's finding the thing that fascinates you and doing that.